Friendly group, and in a lot of ways, you know, I was reading this gospel over, and I think I'm encountering what's it, homily cramp, you know, like writer's cramp, trying to come up with not necessarily interpretations, there's thousands of them out there, but ways to try to connect it for us. So just as an aside to that, I need a woman for. See, there's a pause here, you're supposed to laugh. That's just an amazing one. I'm not ready to laugh something. It's a slow crowd today, I'll tell you.
You will notice nobody jumped in to volunteer. We're all waiting.
I saw you with your hand ready to go. Yes, it is. I got to work on that. Next week is Mother's Day, next Sunday. Am I correct?
Yes.
Good. And while I would enjoy the opportunity to talk to you about motherhood, I always feel that it's much better for someone from our community to come forward and talk about what it means to be a mother. And I know Joan in the past has done a magnificent job. And if no one comes forward, I will ask Joan again. And now that I've said it publicly, of course you can't say no. But at the same time, I'm going to take the offer out there. If anyone would like to take advantage of the opportunity and to share with us, and don't worry, you don't have to be whatever the great speaker, Stephen Lewis, to get up here and to speak. After all, if I can do it, probably anyone can do it. So, those of you who are mothers in our group today, think about it and feel free to come forward. And if we have a few people coming forward, then we'll slot you in throughout the course of our year. And, no, just once, though. The whole calling is unless you want to. So, Virginia, it sounds like you're really interested. Well, what is this gospel to do with us, as I said? Well, we're very much like the early disciples in so many ways. And I always find that really striking and interesting and fascinating and very spiritually refreshing. And I think back to our formation as a group. You know, we all know at one point we felt like we were on a desert island, we'd been abandoned. Deserted island, we've been abandoned. And we weren't sure what to do or where we were going to go. There was a whole lot of uncertainty in our midst. And I think the disciples shared that feeling very deeply. Here was their leader, the person they followed. They'd seen the miracles, they'd heard the great words of wisdom. And a new world opening right before their eyes. And then, this person that they followed is taken from them so violently. So there's a great feeling of loss, of emptiness, as they sat around and mulled over, what are we going to do next? What do we do next? If you take a look at the picture, the Last Supper, it's really neat. You know, I was sitting there looking at it and I was listening to what Sandy was saying in the early readings, and the people gathered around, there's men, women, and children there. Those are all of those disciples that John's talking about here. And they're all invested in this. What are we going to do? And Jesus comes to them and appears before them. And notice the words he says. Peace be with you. They must have been absolutely terrified. I know I would be. It's fine, it's one thing to say, oh, you know, Jesus, the Son of God, can appear and disappear at will. What a great thing, but just imagine some Sunday as we're sitting here in our reflection before, after we have our opening hymn, where we pause and think, and Jesus appears to us. How terrified would we be? And then at the end of the service, we go home, and let's say Don wasn't here that day, and Rosemary said, "Hey, Don, you'll never guess what? Jesus appeared today." Okay, Rosemary, what did you guys have in that wine? Right? I mean, so, Thomas, what a bad rap, eh? Doubting Thomas throughout history. Stamped on his name, Doubting Thomas. And I remember as a kid we'd learn about this and being taught, "No, Thomas, not a nice guy. You should have believed what the other apostles were saying." Hardly. He said, "Look, I know you guys are afraid, and you imagined all this." And probably Thomas is one of the cynics. The 12 apostles that Jesus had, they cover all realms of life. Right? And there had to be a cynic in the group, because there's cynics among all of us. And these 12 represent people to no end. And in fact, the close disciples represent all walks of life. So here's the cynic say, "Look, I'll tell you what, I will believe," and he sets up this seemingly impossible condition. I can just see him saying this. "Well, I tell you what, I'll believe where he's going. Unless I see the mark of the nails in his hands, put my finger into the nail works, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." There. And sure enough, Jesus appears. And Thomas, poor Thomas, there he is in the midst, man. Oh, man. Thomas, come here. Right? And how Thomas must have felt. But the story is told, and as they say, there were other things that aren't recorded here. This one's recorded because the disciples know that part of being a Christian is questioning. And what a great leap of faith. I've used that phrase before, the great philosopher Kierkegaard. I like that. This great leap of faith to believe. And how often have we had our services here where at the end of it, at least one of you and several people have come forward, if not all of us, and have expressed to each other, "Wow, that was great. I really felt the Spirit." How often does that happen to us? And the philosopher Immanuel Kant says, you know what? That kind of feeling, that is what makes people feel good. And if you compare that to if you get something materialistic, I can't really think of a great example because there's nothing huge. I got season's tickets to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Okay? Wow. I feel good. I mean, happy. But that feeling, that's a materialistic thing. That doesn't compare. It can't compare to the spiritual feeling that a person gets when something good happens to them in a spiritual way. And at the end, when Jesus appears to the disciples, that's how they feel. Because don't forget, they now have to be motivated to go out there into the community, a community which they were terrified of. That's what it says in the gospel, locked doors. In ancient times, you locked the door for one of two reasons. One, you were plotting something, or two, you were afraid. Well, they're not plotting. We know they're afraid. And so, this Spirit fills them. And they want to go out and they want to share this with everyone. And so begins the wonderful journey of Christianity. And from that, all sorts of little communities, just like ours, just like ours, spring up all over. They meet in homes, or they meet, if there are too many to meet in homes, they meet in an area where they can get together, and they worship together. And they have that feeling that we often have. And that keeps them going. Because look at us. That feeling, that deep spiritual feeling, has kept us going. And it will continue to keep us going. And in fact, it's allowed us to do things, in my opinion, of a miraculous nature. Truly miraculous nature. I think the depth of prayer that comes out of this community is truly edifying. And some of the things we've done, people are alive. People are alive today because of your generosity. People are alive today because of your prayers. Now that's the spirit. Season's tickets to the Steelers don't bring that. Or any other material thing that you can think of. Doesn't equate. So, in the week ahead, ponder that great feeling that we have when we get together as followers of Christ. The title of the homily is Be a Smart Sheep. And a little bit of philosophy to begin with. In a large classroom, in a religion course one time, 2 people were called. And they were asked to recite the 23rd Psalm that we just heard moments ago. The first person to get up and speak was a trained orator in speech technique and in drama. He repeated the psalm in a very, very powerful way. And when he finished, people in the class cheered, and they asked for an encore that they might hear this great presentation once again. And then the second person who had been designated with the task, the senior sitting at the back, and she came up to the front, and she began with the same words, "The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want." But when she was finished, there was no sound from the class. Instead, the people sat in a mood of deep devotion and in a mood of deep prayer. The first speaker got up and said, "I believe I have a confession to make. The difference between what you have just heard from my friend and what you heard from me is this. I know the song, but she, my friend, she knows the shepherd." And it's this kind of imagery that Jesus often uses in his Gospels. And this is a neat Gospel. As so many of them are. I guess you hear me say that a lot. I won't say it's my favorite, but it's one of my favorites. And just like a shepherd, Jesus is really concerned about people. It's the welfare of the people that he's concerned about. And we know that he calls himself the Good Shepherd. And it's a nice little title, the Good Shepherd. Notice he doesn't call himself King Jesus, or President Jesus, or Prime Minister Jesus, or Mayor Jesus, or Dr. Jesus, or Reverend Jesus. It's the Good Shepherd, a servant, a caretaker, a provider. He calls himself a shepherd. And we're his people. We're the sheep of the pasture.